Hey guys, it's Coach Dasher, and this video is all about how you solve proportions in the notes part of it, okay? So how this is working, there's 15 problems, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to go through the video and work out all the odd ones on here. And then leave the even ones for you to practice. And what I'll do is I'll also post an answer key for this. The answer key is actually already online where you can see just the answers, but I'll work it out so that you can also see the work that goes with it and so on and so forth. So each one of these problems is just slightly different, a little bit added to each one. So just going through there. But here's the biggest thing that you need to know, and I'm going to start here with number one. When we solve proportions, okay, the main thing you've got to think is first that it's going to be what we call cross multiplication. Okay, so the big word you're going to need to know is it is cross. It's really called the cross product. Okay, but product is just when you multiply things. So the cross product. Now, the first example does give us something nice here. Okay, the first thing I want you to see is you've got a negative sign, okay, out in front of here. Here's what you always need to do. You need to declare where the negative sign is going. What I always like to do is typically I just always send my negative sign to the top. So really how this problem is read is 3 over 4 is equal to negative 6 over n. Okay, that's how I do it. That's how I like to see it. Now, when I say cross product, okay, it literally means you are going to take the top of one side and multiply it by the bottom of the opposite side, and then you will do the same thing. You will take the bottom of one side and multiply it by the top, making that x. Okay, now a lot of you, since you have a pencil, are just going to do something like this where you circle the things that are getting multiplied together. Okay, now, once you do that, here's what's going to end up happening. I always take the top times the bottom of the opposite side, so that would give me 3 times n is equal to, and then it's going to be the bottom of the first one, which would be 4, times the top of the second, which is negative 6. I generally follow that pattern just because it makes it a little bit easier to follow and work out. Now, at this point, you want to take each of these and work it out side by side. So on the left-hand side, 3 times n is just 3n. On the right-hand side, 4 times negative 6 gives you negative 24. And at this point, all it is simplifying the equation, solving to get the letter by itself. So what you got to think here is, how do you undo multiplying by 3 so you can get n by itself? Well, to undo it, you need to divide it. And if you do it to one side, you've got to do it to the other. So n will equal. Now you have a negative and a positive, which is going to give you a negative when you divide. And 24 divided by 3 is 8. Now, that was a very elementary type problem, but you'll see that that's kind of the foundation and the basis that we're going to follow for all of these. Okay, so looking here at this next one is number 3. Now, as you look at number 3, you see it's a little bit more in depth because it's not just a bunch of single numbers or letters. Underneath the 8, you have a 2n plus 4, but the process is still going to be exactly the same. You take the top of one side and you multiply it by the bottom of the other, and then you take the bottom and multiply it by the top. Okay, again, that's your cross product. Watch how this will work out. You end up getting, still have the highlighter. You end up getting 8 times 3 from the first cross is equal to 4 times 2n plus 2. Now, if you look at it here, you'll notice I wrote my 4 first, and here's why. Whenever I have an expression that is more than just a single number, I like to put the single number first, because how I'm going to simplify it is going to be through the distributive property, and I just like having that first. You don't have to write it this way. You could have written it the other way, and it absolutely would have worked out the same. Now, let's go through and simplify. 8 times 3 becomes 24. And then on the right hand side, just like I said, we have to use the distributive property. So you take that 4 and you distribute it to everything in there. So 4 times 2n becomes 8n. 4 times 2 becomes 8. And then it is all just solving and working this out. Okay, so to work this out, before I can get n by itself, I've got to get 8n by itself. So to undo adding 8, I need to subtract it. You can see how all of that stuff that we did first semester is really at work here as well. Okay, 24 minus 8 is 16, which is equal to 8n. Then to get n by itself, you have to undo multiplying by 8, and you do that by dividing. So you get 2 is equal to n. Okay? So once you set up the cross product, you really understand that it is just solving multi-step equations, which is why we started with that yesterday. Okay, number 5 is very similar, so I'm going to just hop right into it and get us going right there. Here, your expression is on top of the first one. Ooh, excuse me, let me get my highlighter. But it's still the same thing. Those two are your cross products. These two are your second ones. Now, the main difference here is you're going to end up seeing that you're going to end up with a variable on both sides, and that's A-OK. Now, typically I told you when I do my cross product, I like to put the top part first, but here I have a single term on the bottom, so I'm going to make it 8 times 2x minus 3, but again, that's still just my blue right there, is equal to the green cross product, which is just 7 times x. Okay, so as you work here, now it's just simplifying. On the left-hand side, I need to use the distributive property. So I get 16x minus 24 is equal to 7x. Now, you who had me last semester know that I generally like to keep my x values positive. The issue here is if I move this 7x over here, then I've moved everything to the same side. So that is not what I want right here, okay? So what I'm actually going to do is do it the opposite way. I'm going to move 16x to the other side. Now, you can always do this. It's not a big deal. My thought process that trumps keeping the x positive is I want to get all my x's on one side by themselves. So that's why I do this. So that leaves me with negative 24 is equal to, well, 7x minus 16x is going to be negative what? Anybody help me out? It's going to be negative 9x. Okay? Now, the reason that I'm showing you this and the reason that this is A-OK, guess what's going to happen? Once I go to divide these and get them by themselves, I'm going to end up with a, you guessed it, a decimal. That's going to happen sometimes with proportions, and that's not a big deal, all right? That's something that we can always live with, okay? And we are good to go with that. Okay, so when you go 24 divided by 9, you end up getting, and I'm just going to round it to 2 decimal places. That's generally my rule. Okay, well, let me slow down for a second. Before that, 2 negatives will make a positive. So I'm going to end up getting positive 2.67 is equal to x. Now, you could leave it as a fraction and reduce it if you want to. I just go ahead and jump straight into a decimal, and I'm A-OK with that. So that's your big thing with proportions that are going to break a lot of the rules that you guys think you know about math. So just so you know that as we go forward. Okay. Now, looking at number 7, the big thing with number 7 is you'll notice that there are 2 expressions. Okay. Now, the thing that I want you to know is in this course, and I'm not saying this for the rest of your mathematical career, but you'll never be multiplying AB times AB in this course, okay? We keep these nice and simplified just so that we can work them out and get some good algebra work. But as you look at this with your blue cross product, you're going to end up with 8 times B minus 10. And then that is going to equal your green cross product, which is 3 times 7b plus 10. All right, now, the only thing that this ends up doing is it means when you distribute, you don't do it to just one side, but you're going to actually do it to both sides. So if you look at the left-hand side, 8 times b becomes 8b. 8 times negative 10 becomes negative 80. Then on the right-hand side, 3 times 7b is 21b, and then 3 times 10 is 30. Okay, now, as I look at this, I like to go ahead and get my b's together. So I'm going to subtract 8b from both sides. That will give me negative 80 is equal to 13b plus 30. Okay, then what I'm going to want to do is subtract that 30. So I subtract 30 from both sides. and I end up getting negative 110 is equal to 13b. Now, this is another one of those that as you look at this, you can already kind of tell what's going to happen. We know that we're going to get something that's not going to work out equally. So if you take 110 and divide it by 13, negative 110 divided by 13, you end up getting that b is equal to negative 8.46. Okay, so you can see being able to plug this in and having a calculator, which a lot of you have not done yet, having a calculator, being able to plug it in and solve it out, that is the biggest thing that you need to do. Okay, so let's keep working here. All right, as we go over to the back, you're going to see that the problems kind of start over again, and it's just kind of a big thing to make sure that we're good and we know what's going on here. Okay, so looking at these, the first thing that I see is there's a negative, so I want to make sure that that negative goes to the top, and then it's all about cross multiplying. I'm going to end up with 8 times 8 and p times 4. So I end up with my blue line being 8 times 8. And then with my green, it is p times a negative 4. As those simplifies, 8 times 8 is 64. P times negative 4 is negative 4p. To undo multiplying by negative 4, you've got to divide it. And you end up getting p is equal to negative 16. All right. So that's very similar to the front. You see kind of how that goes and everything of that. So these next problems are going to follow suit. Okay, I'm just going to talk you through them. I'm going to pick up the speed a little bit. And it's not to try and lose you. It's just something that you should be able to kind of figure it out. So here you see, okay, now let me slow it down because this is sometimes that happens. You notice how this is an equal sign between them. That's what makes this as a proportion. I probably should have said this earlier, and I jumped kind of right into it because all of these are proportions. There's going to come a time where we just multiply things, and there will be a multiplication sign here. Remember, when you multiply fractions, it's across the top, across the bottom. However, when they're equal, that's what makes them a proportion, and that's when you have to do the cross product like we're doing here. Okay? So in this cross product, you end up getting 10 times 9 is equal to 6 times 2n minus 8. All right. On the left-hand side, 10 times 9 is 90. On the right-hand side, you got to take that 6 and distribute it. So 6 times 2n becomes 12n. 6 times negative 8 becomes negative 48. Okay. You got to get n by itself, but before you can get n by itself, you got to get 12n. So you have to add 48 to both sides because that undoes subtracting it. And you end up getting 138 is equal to 12n. Okay. And then, as you know, you want to take 138 and divide it by 12. And after you do that, you get a nice decimal here. And I just say it's nice because it actually ends. You get 11.5. Okay. Again, that's something here that you're going to have to be extra cautious about and make sure you know that it is okay for that to happen. Okay, 2 more problems in this video. All right, again, on number 13, same idea. You want to do the cross product. Okay, and that's going to end up with 10 times p is equal to 9 times p minus 1. 10 times p is 10p. Then you want to distribute that 9. You end up with 9p minus 9. Well, step number 1 is to combine my p's. So I'm going to subtract 9p so that all my p's are on one side and they are by themselves. 10p minus 9p, here's what a lot of you are going to do is say that is 1p, which is equal to negative 9. Now, to be honest, right here, you are done. Okay, the thing that looks funny is there's a number in front of your p. What you need to realize is when there's a 1 out in front, it's really just p is equal to negative 9. Okay, now some of you would say, hey, well, you can't just do that. To get rid of 1, you got to divide by 1. Well, you can do that as well, but negative 9 divided by 1 is negative 9. Okay, All right, last problem for this video, and then you'll have some time to get started on this. And then there's an extra homework sheet, okay? And I'll talk more about that in a second. All right, look in here. Okay, we're coming across and we're saying, okay, we want to do the cross product. Well, we need to do the top of one to the bottom of the other, and then the bottom to the top. And then let's go work them. So for the blue cross product, you get 7 times k minus 1 is equal to, on the right-hand side, or excuse me, yeah, which is the green side, 10 times k minus 6. This is another one where expressions are on both sides. So you've got to distribute, okay? Now, left-hand side, 7 times k is 7k. 7 times negative 1 is negative 7. 10 times k is 10k. 10 times negative 6 is negative 60. All right, then it's all about combining. So what I see is I want to move my 7k so that my k can stay positive. Negative 7 is equal to 3k minus 60. Then I want to take that 60 and move it to the other side so I can get 3k by itself. All right, once that happens, negative 7 plus 60 ends up being 53 is equal to 3k. All right, now, as you look at that, all right, you're going to end up with 53 being divided by 3, which you can probably figure out isn't going to work out nicely. But you divide it up, and you end up getting k is equal to 17.67. Okay, and you can tell here that that is kind of the majority of it. That's the biggest thing that we got going on here. Okay, so what I'm going to do now is let you go ahead and get started. I will post an answer key. It's probably going to be later in the day or even tomorrow before I post that answer key for the even problems on these notes, because I really want you to try it. And as much as I love you guys, I know as soon as I post it, you're just going to copy it. Okay, so I want you to work on those on your own. So the big thing here is finish those even problems. If there's time in class, go ahead and work on that worksheet. If you do not have time in class, just save that worksheet, all right? I'm going to assign some of those problems tomorrow. We're going to slow it down. I'll be back tomorrow, so it'll be nice and it'll be easy, and you'll get to see my ugly face again, all right? So hope this is going well. Appreciate y'all, and I will see y'all tomorrow. Bye.